At Epidaurus, a voice spoken near the stage can remain intelligible hundreds of feet away. That is not a legend. It is an acoustic result associated with the theater's rising stone seats, their spacing, and the way the surface interacts with sound. Imagine sitting near the highest rows. Below you, one actor speaks at ordinary volume. The words do not arrive as a blur. They arrive as language. The theater was built in the 4th century BCE and later modified. Modern tests occur in a reconstructed and changing environment, so they cannot reproduce every ancient condition. Weather, audience density, restoration materials, and background noise all matter. Yet the basic fact remains: this monument was organized for more than sight. Its geometry shaped audibility. Now move underground, into a Roman period Mithraic sanctuary. Many spelaea were narrow, enclosed rooms arranged around a central passage, with benches along the walls and a restricted entrance. Some were adapted from existing spaces. Others imitated caves in built form. Here, sound behaved differently. Darkness shortened visual certainty. Proximity made a quiet voice significant. Stone surfaces returned, absorbed, or scattered speech according to the room's proportions. The important question is not whether these spaces possessed supernatural power. It is whether architecture turned perception into an instrument of authority.
Welcome to Stargate Codex. I am Dr. Elias Thorn. Here, we examine architecture, ritual, and preserved records as systems for organizing knowledge. In this episode, the subject is sound. Who could hear, who could speak, and how a chamber made certain testimony feel privileged. The method is narrow. We will compare 4 kinds of evidence: architectural surfaces, descriptions of sound, restrictions on movement, and the signs used to authenticate participation. A resemblance between 2 chambers is not proof of inheritance. A password in an 18th century lodge is not automatically an Egyptian survival. An echo in a Roman sanctuary is not evidence of an unknown energy technology. The archive is strongest when its categories remain separate. We can ask what was built, when it was built, who used it, and what later writers actually recorded. We can then ask whether different institutions solved similar problems in similar ways. That is the distinction between direct transmission and structural analogy. The continuity we are testing is therefore functional, not genealogical. It concerns the repeated use of controlled audibility to establish boundaries, coordinate bodies, and authenticate authority.
The clearest ancient textual witness is Vitruvius, whose De Architectura was compiled in the late 1st century BCE. In his discussion of theaters, he describes seating geometry, stage proportions, and the movement of sound. He also describes resonating vessels placed in theaters according to musical intervals, intended to reinforce particular vocal registers. Archaeology has not demonstrated that every theater used such vessels exactly as Vitruvius presents them. His account may combine practical knowledge with architectural theory. But the passage establishes a crucial point. An ancient architect could understand a theater as a field of resonance, not merely a shell around a performance. That idea belongs to a wider Greek vocabulary. Aristoxenus, active in the 4th century BCE, discussed pitch, interval, continuity, and perception. His approach gave the trained ear an active role in judging musical order. Proportion was not only a numerical relationship carved into plans. It was something a body experienced through hearing and movement. The materials were ordinary. Curved surfaces could redirect sound. Rough stone could diffuse it. Timber, plaster, fabric, water, and human bodies altered reverberation. A colonnade divided a procession into zones. A low doorway narrowed the field of audibility. Repeated construction could preserve this practical knowledge without requiring a hidden science. At Epidaurus, the measurable outcome is unusually visible. At Vitruvius, the conceptual framework is explicit. Together, they show that sound belonged to architectural planning, even when the surviving record cannot tell us the exact performance conditions.
Egyptian temples extend the comparison across a much longer chronology, but they do not supply a simple line of transmission. Temples were arranged through gates, courts, hypostyle halls, processional axes, and increasingly restricted rooms. Reliefs and inscriptions document priests, rulers, standards, instruments, and ritual objects moving through these spaces under controlled conditions. The surviving material does not provide a complete acoustic manual. It does show graded access. Words spoken in an outer court did not supply the same institutional weight as words spoken within an inner sanctuary. The difference was architectural and administrative before it was mystical. Distance, enclosure, and the identity of the permitted audience changed the meaning of the sound. At Eleusis, the boundary becomes even more deliberate. Literary sources refer to initiation, sacred objects, torchlight, and an obligation not to disclose the central events. The telesterion, the principal initiation hall, is archaeologically identifiable as a large columned structure. Yet the sources do not permit a reliable reconstruction of every phrase, chant, or silence within it. That absence matters. Secrecy is evidence that information was restricted. It is not evidence of the information's exact content. We can describe the festival context, the building, and the social importance of initiation. We cannot responsibly invent a missing acoustic script. Mithraic spelaea present a different but related arrangement. Inscriptions, reliefs, altars, and sanctuary distribution establish small communities across the Roman world. The central tauroctony image, side benches, narrow plan, and controlled entrance could focus bodies toward a shared visual and vocal center. Darkness was not merely a symbol, it was a practical reduction of information.
A participant entering a spelaeum would encounter a room that disclosed itself gradually. The entrance limited the view. The central aisle organized movement. Benches established position. A voice from the far end might carry differently from one spoken beside the doorway. The room helped answer practical questions. Who was present? Where each person belonged? And which portion of the ceremony was available to that person? This is where sound becomes authentication. The question was not only, what do you believe? It was, who admitted you? What rank do you hold? And which words are you authorized to hear? Early modern Masonic documents make this mechanism more explicit. They record passwords, grips, signs, knocks, tiled rooms, and graded instruction. A knock converts a closed wall into a question. The correct response converts it into permission. These practices are documented within their own historical setting. They do not prove descent from Eleusis or Mithras. The Rosicrucian manifestos of the early 17th century provide another register. The Fama Fraternitatis appeared in 1614, followed by the Confessio Fraternitatis in 1615. Their fraternity is presented through symbolic, reforming, and programmatic language that influenced later esoteric culture. Neither text supplies an unbroken acoustic lineage. Both demonstrate the enduring organizational power of secrecy, selective revelation, and restricted membership. That is the continuity, not bloodline, but function. Institutions repeatedly use sound to mark an interior from an exterior, even when their doctrines, dates, and social purposes differ.
The pattern has 4 parts. First, space is divided into acoustic zones. Some sounds are public, others belong to an initiated interior. Second, movement is synchronized through processions, seated assemblies, repeated responses, knocks, or controlled entrances. Third, communication is authenticated through a phrase, rhythm, title, gesture, or answer that an outsider may hear but cannot correctly perform. Fourth, sensory experience is converted into legitimacy. A declaration heard in a darkened chamber, after preparation and among recognized members, does not carry the same social weight as an announcement in an open square. The setting gives the words authority. Memory preserves not only what was said, but the privilege of having been present. This mechanism appears in different forms. A theater distributes a performer's voice to a mass audience. A temple ranks audibility along a processional route. A Mithraic sanctuary compresses participants around a central image. A lodge uses signs and spoken responses to verify membership. Their purposes are not identical. Their functional solution is comparable. Arrange perception, then let the arranged perception reinforce the institution. Musical proportion operates through time rather than a doorway. Repeated tones, measured intervals, processional pacing, and collective responses place bodies inside a shared rhythm. Coordination can feel like revelation because many people attend, move, and answer together.
The mathematics may be explicit as an architectural theory or embedded in repeated practice. Either way, synchronized attention strengthens cohesion. This is acoustic governance. It does not require that every participant be deceived. It requires control over the conditions under which testimony is produced.
The term resonance codex names a reading method, not a lost manuscript. It asks historians to examine sensory arrangements that stone preserves only imperfectly. A plan can reveal a corridor, but not the original volume of a voice. An inscription can name an initiatory grade, but not reproduce the pause before a response. Modern reverberation tests can measure surviving surfaces, yet restoration materials, climate, audience density, and reconstruction all limit the comparison with antiquity. Those limitations do not make acoustical archaeology useless. They define its proper reach. It can establish that a space amplified, diffused, enclosed, or restricted sound. It can show how geometry directed attention and supported coordinated movement. It can reveal where a community placed a boundary between public hearing and privileged testimony. It cannot, by itself, establish extraterrestrial engineering, supernatural forces, or a continuous chain from a Bronze Age temple to a modern lodge. Ancient accounts of celestial signs, divine voices, or beings descending from the sky must be analyzed as dated texts, translated language, ritual representation, and historical testimony. A story about a god's voice may reveal how authority was imagined. It does not automatically describe an external intelligence. The same discipline applies to archives, fragments, and king lists. Provenance, date, language, transmission, and omission must be established before a document is treated as a universal key. The governing question remains direct. What does the source say? When was it produced? And what setting gave its words force? The archive never lies, but interpreters can make it say more than it contains.
Across Epidaurus, Egyptian processional architecture, Eleusis, Mithraic spelaea, Vitruvian theater theory, and early modern systems of Masonic recognition, the strongest conclusion is structural. Human institutions repeatedly turn space into a filter for perception. They decide who may enter, where a voice may carry, which sounds are repeated, and which silences must be maintained. That conclusion is narrower than a theory of one hidden civilization, but it is more defensible. Acoustic control is a recurring technology of authority because it authenticates membership, synchronizes bodies, and makes restricted testimony feel consequential. To test the framework, compare the surviving plan of the theater at Epidaurus with published acoustic measurements made under modern conditions. Read Vitruvius beside architectural evidence. Examine the Telesterion and Mithraic excavation reports. Then place Masonic descriptions and the 1614 and 1615 Rosicrucian manifestos in their own dates rather than forcing them into an ancient lineage. Look for what the stones prove, what the texts preserve, and what later interpreters want them to prove. That concludes our historical tracking of this specific anomaly within the Codex. We have followed the surfaces, the sources, the restricted spaces, and the systems of recognition. Behind the curtain of standard chronology, history leaves a blueprint, but the blueprint must be read against the record. The archive remains open. The text remains.